The one thing I stress to everybody is do not worry about managing at the beginning. Worry about getting the right property in the right area for the right purchase price that can actually turn a profit, because that's the thing. If you screw up, it takes about 2 to 5 years to fix. Whereas if you screw up with a guest, you're going to fix it by the time the next one shows up. So don't stress about management, stress about the right property, and then you'll figure out management and you'll be just fine.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 534. Most Airbnb failures don't come from bad luck. They come from bad assumptions made before the deal ever closes. My guest today is John Bianchi, founder of STR Search, a data-first consulting firm that's guided more than 70 million into short-term rental properties nationwide. Known as the Airbnb data guy, John focuses on what most investors skip: verifying demand, revenue, and downside risk before buying. Today, we're breaking down why most Airbnbs fail, the mistakes investors keep repeating, and how to pressure test a deal so it still works when the market turns. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Airbnb, short-term rentals. You know, a lot of people want to do it. A lot of people are doing it, but how many are actually successful? And what can you tell us about that?
A lot less than you would think. Let's put it that way. A lot of Airbnbs will be up and running for about 1 to 2 years before they're then taken down, just because they weren't generating the money that people thought they were. But with that being said, there are thousands upon thousands that are performing very well and are good ran little businesses that are kicking out a profit. So there's a ton out there. It's just some people do it right and majority of people do it wrong.
I'm looking forward to digging in with you on where people go wrong, where they go right, how they can turn the ship around. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you became an expert in this space?
So one little thing I realized in my bio there that's a little dated is the $70 million of real estate. We're actually like well over 100 million at this point. Within the past 4 years, I've helped somebody else buy an Airbnb every 4 days. And so we're well over 350 deals at this point that we've helped other people purchase. I got this start because I actually had my own little Airbnb portfolio. It was a rental arbitrage, property management type setup, not actually owning the properties themselves. But during that time frame when I had that portfolio, I absolutely loved the data. For whatever reason, even right from the get-go when I was getting started, like I just loved pouring through the Airbnb data because I was this kid who always wanted to own a business. But I was never able to actually know if a business was going to be profitable or not and get a really good idea of it, right? Like, as an example, if you're to open up a Subway, there's no real direction to know exactly how much a Subway is going to make if you open it up on one side of the city compared to the other side. There's like generalities, right? But when it comes to Airbnbs, there's a site called AirDNA that has the revenue of every single Airbnb across the entire world. So you can look at any Airbnb and you can have an idea of exactly how much it's making. And so what I realized was that I can study this data, I can understand it, and I can figure out exactly how much a property would make if I opened it up, right? And to me, this was such a big deal because I came from a bit of an investing background as a financial advisor before. And so I knew that if I could prove to investors that a property was going to make money and I could show them other similar homes making a similar amount of money, that I would be able to raise money and go out and get homes and set them up, right? So this was a really big deal for me. So I don't have a data background. I didn't go to school for data. I just saw a way to raise money. Let's put it that way. And it locked me in. I was like, holy crap, investors are going to love to be able to see this, right? And so I started pouring into the data back in 2016, 2017, somewhere within that time frame, built up my own portfolio. Then COVID wiped that out. Right, so I was in the middle of a city, COVID happened, all of my bookings were gone. And so I was able to get people into those homes. I then took the contracts that I had to all those homes and I sold it off to somebody else. And I said, I'm stepping away from Airbnb. That's what I thought was going to happen, right? But what ended up happening was that at the time, there was a little bit of a word out there that I understood Airbnb data, and there was some people that kept sending people to me for help. So people kept coming to me saying like, hey, can you help me out with Airbnb data? And so then I would sit there and consult them and help review it and help them understand what I was understanding. And eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, Airbnbs, like running Airbnbs, not my favorite thing. But understanding the data is something I can get behind. I'm like, I wonder if I can turn this into a career. And so I reached out to a couple of different companies, and I ended up landing a job with one. Their name is TechVestor. And at the time, they had about 5 properties. I was with them for 2 years. I was their head of data. And in that time frame, we bought 150 properties and became the largest short-term rental investment fund in America. And every single last one of those properties is profitable. And it's because I followed a very strict data process to understand Airbnb data. And then after that, they stopped raising money for a little duration of time. And I said, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to open up STR Search, and we're going to help everybody and anybody be able to find a property if they want to. So I broke my exclusivity contract with them. I still have a contract with them, but we're just not exclusive anymore. And I went out and opened up the doors and said, anyone who needs help, I'll help you do it. This is my track record of what I've done. Now I'll help you do that. And so now we're at over 200 more properties that we've helped find within a 2-year period. And still to this day, every single last one of those properties is profitable. We have yet to have somebody come to us who has said they haven't worked out. So we're well over 350 properties at this point. And that's kind of that roundabout story of how I got to the point of being this person obsessed with Airbnb data and being able to help so many other people invest into the Airbnb game.
You talk about using a very strict data set for determining whether a property is going to be a success or not. Can you kind of take us through that process?
The very first thing is you have to understand what market you actually want to enter into, right? You know what? Let me take it one more step back. To even start, you have to understand the basics of Airbnb data, right? The majority of the data that's actually on these platforms is not useful. And the reason that's not useful is because either when it was getting tracked, there was an error in the way it was being tracked. The host is only a part-time host. Maybe the home's only been up and running for 3 months, right? You don't know what the annual revenue is going to be if it's only been up for 3 months. So you first have to start off with being able to understand the data, okay? So that you're only working with good data. That's the very first step.
Highlight, what are like the 5 main data points that people would be looking at it in the beginning that may or may not be correct?
So the easiest way to understand this is a couple of things that you need to look for to make sure that it is good data, most likely good data, okay? So you can't get annual revenue out of like 3 months worth of revenue. Okay, the platforms will try to predict what the property is going to make, but it's not until it's been up and running for over 270 days where you're really going to get like a good idea of how much that property is going to make, where it's going to be a lot more accurate, right? And so every single property that's out there, you're going to ignore anybody who has not been managing for 270 days. Now, on top of this, what's going to happen is when you ignore all those people, you're going to ignore the vast majority of the people who are only doing it part-time as well. And so we got rid of a good chunk of useless data, okay? Just by saying we're only looking at people 270 days or more. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go and look at the reviews, because I'm going to be a full-time host and I want to see the data from other full-time hosts because that's the best possible data. And so if I go look at the reviews and check to see a review every single month for the past 12 months, ideally 1 to 3, then I'll be able to find homes that are actually full-time managed full-time. Whereas when I then start going through the reviews, what I may notice is that there's a gap of like 4 months where there's no reviews. And that's because that host shut it down over the winter. Maybe they used it personally. Maybe they rented it a long term. But whatever they did, they screwed up the data when they did that. And now all the numbers are inaccurate. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that at a minimum, it's been up and running for 270 days and that there's more than 20 reviews at a minimum. But really what you really want to make sure is that you're actually going into the calendars, seeing that there's been a review every single month for the past 12 months. And when you do that and you meet those 3 pieces of criteria, 270 days, 20 reviews, a review every single month for the past 12 months, you're most likely looking at good data at that point. So that's how you get the good stuff.
Let's back up a little bit. You're looking at all of this in AirDNA. Is that what you're looking at? Now, what does AirDNA take into account? Is it just Airbnb or does it include Vrbo, Booking.com, all the other platforms?
So when you have an Airbnb, your Airbnb calendar is synced to your VRBO calendar, and both of those calendars are synced to your direct booking and any other booking channel that you're possibly going to be on, right? So technically, AirDNA only has to look at one calendar and they can generally get the right number. So meaning if they just looked at the Airbnb calendar and then all of a sudden you get a booking on VRBO and it blocks off the Airbnb calendar, well, they're going to assume that's still a booking, and they're going to assume it was for the nightly rates that you showed on Airbnb. It may be different on VRBO, but not by much. So as long as they're just tracking Airbnb, you'd be fine. But really, they're tracking Airbnb and VRBO. And just between those two, you're pretty much accurate all the way through. Now, some people may have their own direct booking site and the price is going to be different, but it's never different enough to make a huge difference to that annual revenue.
And then once you determine, okay, what data here should you actually be looking at that's not faulty, what's the next step?
So now we know how to look at the data. Okay. Now we need to go, what market are we actually going to go into? And this is where we're going to stop looking at data for a second and go look at the regulations. So you want to make sure that the market actually has regulations already in place and they say, you can do this, just play within our sandbox, right? And so you figure out the rules and you follow the rules. If they don't have regulation in place, you're taking a risk because they're more than likely going to put something in place eventually. And then if they are saying you're not allowed to do Airbnb, that's a really stupid place to buy, right? So pretty straightforward stuff. Be in a place where they actually allow it.
So there's three levels there. They have regulations and they allow it, or they don't have regulations and you're not really sure, or they have regulations and they don't allow it. That middle one, is that a no-go for you? I mean, would you ever invest in an Airbnb where the community has not yet decided what they're going to do?
It would depend on the state, actually, more so. So you got states like Florida, Arizona, Texas. They have like statewide regulation that's very, very favorable. So if they didn't have anything already in place, I would then go look at what does the state have in place. And if the state has nothing in place, I would then go look at which way that state voted. If I'm being very honest with you, did they vote blue or did they vote red? And anyone knows which way you would want to go, right?
That's interesting because I can see that for like rent control type things. But when it comes to vacation rentals, like the people who are against it really kind of seem to come from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, they do. But in the blue states, we have seen that the regulation gets passed significantly easier and more strictly in comparison. Yeah, if you were to go look at the Airbnb regulation for blue states compared to red states, it's a very clear difference.
It's in the data then.
I'm Canadian, by the way, so I can say that without there being any issues.
I won't make any jokes about you becoming one of us.
You mean a dream come true?
Yeah. Okay, so what? Okay, just to be clear, if it's a red state, there's better chance that they're going to be more friendly toward vacation rentals. Okay, then what's the next step in your data due diligence?
Yeah, you figured out the market, it has good regulations, you're allowed to operate there, right? Now we got to figure out, is there any cash flow within this market? Because the reason I hyper focus on cash flow as being like one of the main metrics that I care about when it comes to Airbnbs is because it's the biggest differentiator between a long-term rental and a short-term rental. A short-term rental is naturally going to be more work than a long-term rental, right? Therefore, let's make sure that we're buying a property that's actually going to produce us a higher cash flow, right? And then on top of that, with a short-term rental, you have to buy furniture, you got to buy, hot tubs and saunas, you got to buy all these things to make your property desirable and more desirable than your competition so that you can secure your bookings at a higher nightly rate. So then therefore, we want to make sure we're making enough cash flow to repay for all the furniture and amenities that we put in there. And it's also worth the time that we're putting in it to actually manage it. And so if we focus in on cash flow, we will get that. We'll also then get the appreciation and principal pay down, just like you do when it comes to a long-term rental, because we can hold on to it long-term, right? So first thing is cash flow. And so the way that I look for cash flow, and this is where it's going to get a little complicated, you can generally figure out if a market has cash flow potential, like good cash flow, by using something I refer to as the 20% rule, okay? This is not cash on cash. I'm not talking about 20% cash on cash. What I'm talking about is the price to rent ratio within that market. So if I buy a home for $500,000, that's the purchase price. If that home can make $100,000, that's my rent, right? So the price to rent ratio. And so the revenue, that rent there, is 20% of the purchase price, that $500,000. Does that make sense? So $100,000 in revenue to a $500,000 purchase price.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. So the equivalent of like the 1% rule in buying a single family home, you're looking at the 20% rule, which is whatever you pay for the property, you need to gross, and I'm assuming you mean gross, 20% of that amount in any given year.
Correct. Now, it's not a perfect formula. It's not a perfect formula. Just like the 1% rule is not a perfect formula. There's variables to it, right? The more expensive the home gets, so when you're at like a $1.5 million home, that price to rent ratio will shrink. It actually can get closer to like 10, 12, even 15%, somewhere in that range. And it's still a very cash flow positive property. And then the opposite way, so when the home is now like $300,000, well, that price rent ratio needs to be like 30, 35% for it to actually start making sense. So that's the majority of homes are within the $500,000 purchase price nowadays, right? So using the 20% rule tends to work fairly easily.
So you're saying that, like, the average price of a STR is going to be $500,000. But if you're paying only $300,000, well, you need to bump that ratio up to like 35% because obviously, like, you have uncontrollable costs that are just going to eat up most of that profit.
So it's because the operating expenses to run the property don't drastically change if you buy a $300,000 home or a $1.5 million home. It doesn't get, so the Netflix subscription is not more expensive on a $1.5 million home compared to a $300,000 home. It's the exact same. So there's other things that are relatively similar like that. Just because a home costs more doesn't mean that it's going to cost more to operate. You could buy a $1.5 million 2,000 square foot home, right? You can also buy a $300,000 2,000 square foot home. And the utility bill could be the exact same on both of those. But with that $1.5 million home, you're going to be in a far more desirable location where your revenue, the amount that you can ask for on a nightly basis, is going to be most likely a lot higher in comparison to the market where the home only costs $300,000. And so then therefore, with these sort of $300,000 homes, those operating expenses, utilities, subscriptions, getting someone to shovel your driveway, those are all staying pretty well the same. And so you've got, in other words, you have to make a certain amount to even just start to break even. And that number to start to break even stays relatively similar regardless of the price of the home. And so on a $300,000 home, the ratio between the $300,000 and how much revenue you need to make just is higher. It's a higher ratio between those two.
Is there a sweet spot where you like to see, if you're looking at a property, you like to see them spending a certain amount because you know that it's more likely to be successful?
No sweet spot. It's a lot of variables. It depends on the market. It depends on, there's just a lot of variables. Essentially, you just want to find a place where making more than your debt is possible, because that's actually the hard part. So I've studied like well over 500 markets, and we have like 35, 40 right now that actually work.
Let's skip ahead and tell us which markets work then.
This is the one thing that I never, ever talk about publicly is the markets that we're in. And the reason being is because we've helped place well over 100 million. And if I went around telling everybody where to go, they would go flood those markets. And that'd be really unfair to my past clients who have put a lot of money into those markets. So I don't want to create increased competition, make it harder for them to hit their revenue numbers. So I never, ever share markets online.
Then what market should people avoid? What's played out?
Any market where the regulation sucks. That's a very easy one.
Would that be like New York City?
Yes, New York City, San Francisco have banned Airbnbs forever ago, right? But there's a lot of like middle places. So Michigan, as an example, market you'll know well. It's actually a really hard market regulation wise. Every single last nook and cranny has a different regulation and a different way of setting things up. And if they don't have one in place, they're definitely bringing one in place sooner than later. And we've heard stories of where like people pull out this like deed out of their grandma's chest from years ago, and they're like, hey, it says in here like no vacations, so you can't actually rent it out, and that actually holds up in the court, and so then people lose. So places like that, regulation wise, it's just an easy no. But the other place that a lot of people actually think of are what I call like the class A vacation markets. So like the whatever popped in your head right now, if you think all across America is like, where do people go for vacation across America? Like those main spots.
Like Disneyland.
One of the worst spots by far.
Disneyland, Disney World?
One of the worst ones.
Why is that?
They built a ridiculous amount of homes to be able to accommodate the amount of people that were going there, but they overbuilt for sure. For sure overbuilt. Your competition is insane. It's very, very, very strict, high. So the people who have like made it work are putting like $12,000+ Actually, like 4 years ago, they were putting 10,000. So I imagine it's even more now, to go all out and design these rooms that were like unbelievably beautiful, fun, cool, really, really exciting. So the amount of money you got to put into those properties to get them up and running is a lot. And then even with all that money put in, the ceiling for how much you can make is actually not that high, because there is a bit of a saturation thing going on within that market right now. Some people have made it work, but even within the past 4 years, you've just seen the revenue just all over the place. 2019 and 2018, it was doing well. Like it was actually really well. There were like 60,000 listings at one point. COVID hit, it dropped down to 30,000. So 30,000 listings disappeared. Then you go into the time frame when like finally Disney World opens back up, and you get back, got back up to like 40,000 listings. So even with like 20,000 listings missing, the revenue is never still fully recouped from that time frame. And so and then on top of that, during COVID, all the home prices doubled in that area. Now it did in a lot of different areas, but specifically in that area where the revenue is dipping, you have hard saturation, the home prices now double, and it just is real, like you got to put so much money in to outperform your competition, and there's thousands and thousands of options that are all just as nice. And so then therefore it made it really, 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 really hard to make it work within that market or to excel or stand out or anything. And on top of that, you go into these HOA areas. So this is an area where they have HOAs that allow Airbnbs. The communities are built out for short-term rentals. And then they have like these water parks in them. They're really, really cool. But the problem is that you have a backyard that's the size of like my arm. And your backyard is sort of like your area where you can outcompete people. You can do things that nobody else can do, but you have almost no room in your backyard to do anything. And then if you did, they don't really allow you to do anything in the first place. So you couldn't like throw in a pickleball court in there and be able to like stand out from everybody because they're all built the exact same. So, and then if you go outside of the HOA, you're now missing out on the water park and you're missing out on those things. So it's an unbelievably complicated market. And you have so many people, especially foreign investors, an insane amount of foreign investors have bought in that area, and they don't care about turning a profit. And so when you have that happen, what happens is they'll rent it out for $50 a night, $100 a night for a 4-bedroom home. We see this, right? 4-bedroom home, $100 a night. Now you're trying to create like an amazing place that's really expensive. They're going to Disney World. It's already really expensive. They had to fly there in the first place. They'll take the bad Airbnb, save the money, and go spend it in Disney World, right? So there's a million reasons I don't like that market, as you can tell, and I can keep going if you want.
That's great. Do you take that into account then as part of your data due diligence, the competition? And I mean, obviously that would be, what is the going rate there? What are people charging? But that sort of like insight that you just talked about, how does that show up in the data?
A couple of different ways. You can see how the annual revenue has been pacing year over year. So you can see if there's maybe like been a decrease or it's just sort of wonky. It's like some years it's up, some years it's way down. Like you want it to be steady. You can see how many new listings are coming into a market or have been over the past like 4 or 5 years. So you can see if it's just like a steady, straight line up or if it's more like leveled out. Both can be good, both can be bad. You kind of have to like figure out the market. You can also see how much every single Airbnb is making, right? So you talk about the nightly rate that people are having in their occupancy. Ultimately, all that matters is, well, how much did they make over the full year? And you can see those listings. So you can actually take a look, open up the Airbnb and review it to try to see what kind of design level has been put together for those properties and see if it's even possible to match it or not and still turn a profit. And then you can review more and more and more listings. And eventually you find out that there's a lot of listings here that people don't do anything with, but they're still running them because they don't care if it turns a profit. It's just a place for them to hold money. Right. And then you're just taking in a lot of factors. Like even people refer to data as numbers, but data is everything. Right. So you talk to the local realtor and you start asking them questions. Like that's how I found out about all the foreign investors into Orlando in that area, Kissimmee, because the realtor told me like, yeah, like, oh, all those homes you see there with the exact same couch and like 40 of the different listings. Yeah, that's actually a Chinese investor who bought all those homes and just did the exact same thing over and over again, right? That's a piece of data where you go, okay, now I have to compete with that, right? There's a place out near Dallas where there's beautiful homes, beautiful homes, but it's these really rich people in Dallas buying these beautiful homes, getting a tax credit, right? They're saving a bunch of money in taxes and they're not trying as hard as the other people, but their homes are so beautiful that when they do decide to try, the other homes that are worse are going to get wiped out.
Management is one of the most important functions and one of the most expensive line items. Does your due diligence and data kind of point to which management companies are good, especially for those who are remote from their properties, which management companies they should work with, which management companies should they avoid?
The data doesn't point to that directly. This is something you kind of figure out market dependent. Majority of the time, the vast, really, really large ones you want to avoid. The smaller ones tend to be significantly better to work with. And you kind of have to go through it with them to see if they're actually worth it or not. There's a handful of players across a lot of different markets that are decently good, but each market will have their best operators. And so each market's a little bit different. The one thing I stress to everybody is do not worry about managing at the beginning. Worry about getting the right property in the right area for the right purchase price that can actually turn a profit, because that's the thing. If you screw up, it takes about 2 to 5 years to fix. Whereas if you screw up with a guest, you're going to fix it by the time the next one shows up. So don't stress about management, stress about the right property, and then you'll figure out management and you'll be just fine.
Any other factors that you look at in your data due diligence before we wrap it up here?
So I apologize. I give really long-winded answers. So the once you figure out the market that you want to be in, right, and you understand that there's cash flow there, what you do at the next point is study every single property and understand what drives revenue. So what I mean by that is you can have 2 identical homes, but one will make $50,000 more. They could be in the same area, same bedroom count, everything, but one's making $50,000 more. It's your job to figure out why. And you got to look for, is it the design? Is it the amenities? Is it the photos? Is it the management? Is it the pricing? You got to figure out what the answer is. Once you figure it out, you reverse engineer that and do it to your listing. And then you'll be the listing making $50,000 more rather than $50,000 less. And then you can go out and find the property that matches the criteria that will allow you to drive the most amount of revenue. Make sure it's at the right purchase price where there's still going to be cash flow. And then you just go out and get that home and reverse engineer it, meaning turn it into that beautiful listing. And then you should be able to hit the revenue numbers that the competition has been able to hit. And that's how you're going to turn a profit.
John, how would people find out more about you, get a hold of you, and feel free to plug your company or whatever you want to talk about?
STR Search. .com is my website. I always tell people just to go there because I have a free training. It's called a 7-day Airbnb data basics course. It'll teach you everything you need to know about how to find the right property. Obviously, the amount of time we have right now is not enough to get that right answer, but you have a free training right there that you can go through. I put it together after finding 120 properties. Every single one of those is profitable. strsearch.com. If you want to find me, you'll figure it out once you get to the website.
How are you using AI right now?
In the business that we're building out, we're using a lot of automations. I use it a lot just to brainstorm and figure things out. Outside of that, we're not really using it in the Airbnb data world just yet.
What automations are you doing and what are you using for it?
I have a guy who does all that within the company.
So you have your AI tech guy who does all that for you?
Yeah,
okay.
I've got a guy who's helping with that, so I actually can't answer that thoroughly or properly.
Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about short-term rentals and doing your due diligence and the data sets that you look at to help other people decide, hey, is this going to be a good investment or is this one that looks good, but it'll actually end up losing money for me? Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RC RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.